Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Man, that was weird. I mean, the sun was out, and then all of a sudden, it was like sleeting. Stuff was hitting the windows like little BBs. Whoa. Now that stopped. What's next? God. Anyway, hi. How you doing? It's Monday. I have no idea what the date. I mean, I just saw it's April 24th, but if you had asked me, I don't know. That means May is almost upon us. That's good. God. I think I'm in a very Monday mood, and that's just a warning. I'm going to tune out now. I just can't, I can't organize my thoughts very readily, it seems. Today begins the trial, the federal trial downtown for the guy. I mean, it's so odd. We all know he did it. So what is the trial is about? It's not like innocent until proven guilty. How does a trial where everybody knows he did it last for, they say, perhaps into July, if it's starting now? How the hell is that possible? I mean, I think these questions are somewhat rhetorical. But, oh, come on. Your connection is not fucking private. It doesn't say fucking, but it won't let me get to what I want to see. Incredible. So I'll see if I can access it someplace else. But the Bowers trial, I really don't get. I know you have to go in and prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury that this guy did what he did, but we know he did it. So how long does that take? I mean, you could, oh God. Let me see if I can bring it up here. I'm looking for a piece that was written for the strike paper that comes out. You guys are aware of that? You know, the PG, which I no longer access. If you've noticed, I've got, for instance, I'm not seeing local obits, which for me is it's tough. But I'm just not accessing it. I have no access to it, and I'm not going to pay to have any access to it. But I am subscribed to what's called unionprogress.com, and that's the strikers. And they're continuing to do work, the work they know how to do, even though they're not getting paid for it. And so the piece I was looking for is by striking reporter Torsten Ove about the synagogue shooting trial about to start. And it's extensive. It is so well done. And I doubt that you will see anything as good in the scab paper if you're still reading it. So, I mean, it is odd. It's been almost it's more than 4 years. It's 4.5 years since that horrible massacre of people in prayer. And the killer has been alive and getting 3 meals a day, and now he's finally going to have to what? Head into a court and answer for his crimes. I mean, when you think of the extent of his crimes, the murder of 11 people at worship, the wounding of many other grievous wounding of others who survived. It's and the fact that he engaged in a shootout with a SWAT team. And of course, the question must be asked: if this were a black guy, would he still be alive? How often, when we hear of police shootings of innocent people, are we told that the police feared the person had a gun, mistakenly thought the person had a gun, or in fact the person had shot at them and they end up dead? You just end up dead. It wasn't even one-on-one. It was one. There were a number of cops and this guy, and he doesn't end up dead. So the little pebbles are starting up again. BBs are at my window again. So you understand what I'm saying? It's an interesting question that we have to ask: is how does he survive that? Most of these mass shootings, the killer, ends up dead. He was merely wounded, and I don't believe grievously, and was immediately given medical care. So it's been over 4 years since he slaughtered all those people. Now he gets his day in court, and all of the survivors of those people and the people who were truly harmed are going to have to relive it in gruesome detail for the benefit of the jury, when everybody knows this guy did it. It seems like a lot more pain and suffering being visited upon people who have already endured quite a bit. And so the fact that this is a federal death penalty trial is what sets it apart. I think the answer to all of these rhetorical questions, other than why is Bowers even alive, is that it's a federal death penalty trial, and the feds don't do the death penalty very often anymore. And he's got lawyers. God. This son of a bitch murderer has some of the best lawyers who have been doing the Trumpian thing, which is to delay and delay and delay with all manner of objections and appeals to the judge that this not be allowed or that not be allowed. At one point, apparently, I learned from reading this wonderful article, the defense team even objected to, made a big to-do about FBI agents wearing guns during a review of the evidence inside the FBI building. And that wasn't a major delay, but the reality is that, of course, the FBI, the Bureau requires agents to carry their guns while on duty. But this is the kind of nitpicking that has slowed this thing down. And as I said, guilt is not in doubt. He did it. I mean, they've even got Bowers' own, after he's wounded, he's talking to the cops who didn't somehow kill him. And the cops will testify, although this was also something the defense tried to keep out of the trial. that Bowers said to the cops, all these Jews have to die. More than one cop heard him say it. So the issue is whether he lives or dies. The issue is really whether the jury will sentence him to death. And even if they do, he ain't going to get executed. I don't think. I'm trying to get that. Prior to Trump, who ended his 4 years as president of the United States with a killing spree of his own, the Trump administration carried out 13 executions in the federal death chamber in Terre Haute, Indiana. Most of them in the final weeks of the administration. So while Trump was busily hatching, the plot to remain in office no matter what, he was making sure he killed as many people as he could that had been given the death penalty. But that is not something that Barack Obama had done. And that is not prior to that, what Ove calls that unprecedented spree. A man named Lewis Jones Jr. had been the last person executed by the federal judicial system. And that was in 2003. So it's not, it just isn't going to happen, even if the jury finds him. I doubt it unless Trump wins again. But Trump wouldn't kill him. He's probably, Bowers will be a hero, right? To parts of Trump's base. So I don't understand. So what's happening today, and this will be covered nationally. I mean, Pittsburgh's going to be back in the news for this. This was a huge event that did get international attention, and this trial will as well. And you may have seen that the members of Tree of Life said goodbye to that building this weekend. Remove the mezuzah from the doorpost, that thing that holds, that Jews put on their doors, that holds words from the Torah. That was taken down, and so it is no longer in any way, shape, or form a synagogue. And I suspect the timing of that has to do with the trial as well. I don't know. Incredible. So this is going to apparently take a long time. And they talk about, the stuff of what radicalized Bowers was, all the white nationalist and crap on the internet. A lot of what his main source of information was that site Gab. And the reason we all know about Gab is because it was a favorite site of Mastriano, who wanted to be the governor of Pennsylvania. It even had the guy who headed Gab endorsing him and giving him some kind of, I forget, deal where he amplified every Mastriano utterance on the website. So if there's any doubt about where Mastriano's coming from, he's coming from the same place that Bowers comes from. And on Gab, he spewed this crap about, the Jews replacing white Americans, which is something I never even comprehended until I understood that it wasn't the Jews themselves replacing white Americans. It was Jews like George Soros, apparently, financing caravans of brown people to come into the country to take white Christians' jobs. And it was Gab that posted the information that sent Bowers to Wilkins Avenue, Squirrel Hill that day. It was Gab that had posted a screed about the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, a group that, since I realized this is what target I have been giving money to. 2 weeks before the slaughter, Bowers posted a screenshot on Gab of the part of the web page of the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. So he'd gone to their web page, and the part he put on there is where they talked about an event that they called the National Refugee Shabbat, meaning that on this Sabbath day, they were asking Jews to think about the plight of the refugee. And they had posted the number of congregations and the names of congregations that were, in fact, on board with this and were essentially hosting this idea of, let's use this Sabbath to think about the refugees. And one of those names that was on the list from that website that he posted was Dor Hadash, which is one of the congregations, a small congregation that used that Tree of Life building to worship. So it was Dor Hadash on the HIAS website that he sees. That is why, and he posts on Gab, and then 2 weeks later, he goes in and mows them down. He even wrote, as he posted it, "Why, hello there, HIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. You like to bring in hostile invaders to dwell among us? We appreciate the list of friends you have provided." And then he got ready to do what he was going to do. And then just before the massacre, he posted also, "The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society likes to bring invaders in that kill our people. I can't sit by and watch my people get slaughtered. I'm going in." Wow. The delusion at work there. Amazing. And this piece ends thusly. Prosecutors say they want to present all of Bowers' statements to tell the full story of the crime And their theory of how an unremarkable 50-year-old Pittsburgh truck driver joined the growing ranks of America's mass killers. So, jury selection begins today. And obviously, that's going to be an arduous undertaking for, I would imagine, the defense will be really. I mean, would the defense let a Jew? I mean, can the defense say they will not let a Jew as a juror? I mean, what do you think? How would a court rule in a case like that? Can a Jew possibly be on this jury? Okay. The other trial that I think does it start tomorrow? Is the Trump rape trial, civil trial, where she's looking for damages in a civil trial, and E. Jean Carroll, and the odds are he ain't going to show. By law, does not have to be there. So my guess is he won't. My guess is he wouldn't be foolish enough to take the stand. I don't know. So there's all of that going on. And then I read something. I thought, here's a headline that we can all ascribe to. This was in yesterday's New York Times in the opinion section. And I thought, well, yeah. The headline is, "We don't know what will happen next." Well, that is true. And that is, always true. Despite the fact that I think we tend to live our lives with the assumption that we do know what's going to happen next. We like to think that things happen as they're supposed to on schedule. I'm sure when the people went to worship that day, they were not expecting what happened to them. They thought they were going to worship and then be able to have some moments of camaraderie with their fellow worshipers, and then they were going to go home and on to their families. We don't know what will happen next about just about anything. But this piece is about the fact that we seem to be in cataclysmic times, which is why, which is why I think I told you the other day I was at a birthday party for somebody, and someone I hadn't seen in ages came up to me and looked at me and just said, "We're fucked." Now and the fact that I understood immediately what he was, I don't know specific what he was referring to, but he was referring to all of it. All the stuff that we talk about on a daily basis. And that for those of us who are paying attention, there is this sense of, why everybody's quoting that Yeats poem, that the center will not hold. My God, I was quoting that poem, 12 years ago or more, when we were all back and I actually had a studio. I got to look up that W.B. Yeats poem, because it seems to me it absolutely is germane to these times. What did I know? So this piece, we don't know what will happen next, gets into, but I just want to share a few things with you, because I think it's good to keep in mind what this guy, Jerome Roos, is saying. He, by the way, says is a political economist and historian at the London School of Economics. Didn't Mick Jagger go to the London School of Economics? I think he did. Always struck me as odd, but what do I know? So Jerome Roos says, we're living in clearly an age of upheaval. And that if you look at history, and this guy knows his history, he's a historian, history does go through periods of relative quiescence and then periods of extraordinary upheaval. But he acknowledges that this period of upheaval is shaping up to be a real doozy. So that the person who said to me, we're fucked, is on to the same kind of feeling I'm having and a lot of other folks are having, is that we've dealt through, gone through ups and downs and where the world seems a little shaky. And yeah, I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis and Vietnam and all that other stuff, and the 60s. But no, this seems different. Something bigger is going on. And he acknowledges that. And he says humanity now faces a confluence of challenges unlike any other in its history. He's saying this is that unique in human history, what we're seeing. I mean, I guess he doesn't say this, but the last time humanity faced a true upheaval you could say it was World War II, but I'm going to say no. I'm thinking it's more like the Industrial Revolution, where the idea of how people went about their lives and how they worked and where people lived and what they did and changed everything rather quickly, but not like we're enduring the warp speed with which things happen now. So he says, when he says these are unlike any other challenges, and he initially starts with the climate thing. Climate change is rapidly altering the conditions of life on our planet. Humanity's never dealt with what we're dealing with there. And a lot of us, when we say we're fucked, are thinking that humanity is not rising to the challenge that one situation has put upon us. So he says climate change is rapidly altering the conditions of life on the planet. And then if you just look at, Ukraine, Taiwan, the tensions there have in fact revived the specter of a conflict between nuclear superpowers. And then the one that freaks me out a lot, the breakneck developments in artificial intelligence, which are raising serious concerns about the risk of an AI-induced global catastrophe of some sort. And and none of that mentions the little things that all of this does to individual lives, to people just knowing how to communicate with each other, or for the fact that we're all in our little silos now. All these instruments that were supposed to build community have in fact isolated us seemingly more and more. So he says, and so, given that this is an age of incredible upheaval, we are presented with two familiar but very different visions of the future. There's the doomsday narrative. That's the one I tend to get onto, which sees apocalypse everywhere. And then there's this other glass half full narrative, which maintains that this is the best of all possible worlds. And look at all the amazing things that are happening. And he says, here's where he says, the truth is that none of us can really know where things are headed. The crisis of our times has blown the future right open. And my sense is that he's suggesting that we try to avoid the binary. It's either apocalypse or, the Panglossian. It's the best of times. And that's often the case. That people like me who are like, are a little too, probably. I mean, that somewhere, maybe in the middle is the reality. But as we can keep saying with absolute certainty, but we don't really know what's going to happen. It has to do with choices and unexpected consequences and all kinds of things. And he talks about human nature. Humans prefer clarity. It's why, Fox News exists. They see everything as black and white, evil and good. Most people are more comfortable with a very clear and linear narrative on reality. And that's nuts, because reality is chaotic and it's unpredictable and it's complex. But people and human nature doesn't like ambiguity, doesn't like contradiction, doesn't like living with that. So the go-to for most people is to simplify. Put it on a bumper sticker. That they can get their heads around, that they can understand. But when things are as complicated as they are, that's not helpful. So anyway, he says we are in the midst of a really painful transition. And such huge shifts are inevitably fraught with danger. But they are also full of possibility. So that's probably true. It's just my reading of human nature and human history is that humans tend to go the wrong way, I think. Progress and catastrophe. Those binary opposites, he writes, are really joined at the hip. Together, progress and catastrophe. They engage in an endless dance of creative destruction, forever breaking new ground, spiraling into the unknown. And we don't know, as the headline on this piece said, we don't know where we're heading. It's impossible to know. Oh, speaking of Fox News, where did I see this? I thought it was just some numbers real fast. When the defamation trial ended, that was a big news day, right? That was a big news day. Settlement. Fox to pay $750 million, yada, yada, yada. That night, that day, I guess, Fox devoted just 6 minutes and 22 seconds to that story. And that was across 3 segments. In other words, It wasn't like they concentrated on it for 6 minutes. No, they scattered little mentions, and that if you added them all up, it's 6 minutes that they gave the story. Not one of the prime time shows said a word. Now we know all the other news operations, as opposed to Fox, was really covering it. It was a huge story. Tucker Carlson, on the other hand, began his show with a segment about violence in Chicago by mostly black people. And he said, "This is why we used to shoot looters." Now, that's telling you that nothing will change at Fox. In fact, they might double down. Anyone who thinks they learned a lesson, no, they learned the lesson. I mean, I suppose they'll be more careful in their messaging to each other. Maybe they'll get into, go old school and actually write notes to each other, which you then burn after reading or something. Incredible. And I don't know if you saw this, but it was not surprising to see. The grandson of the man who, when that poor black teenage boy rang his doorbell thinking his brothers were there, the man who then shot him in the head, his grandson spoke out. And he said, "I was horrified, blah, blah, blah." And then he said, and this is not shocking to hear what he said. The grandson said that he had been close, very close to his grandfather. But here's his words. "But in the last 5 or 6 years or so, I feel like we'd lost touch. I'd gotten older and gained my own political views, and he's become staunchly right-wing. Further down the right-wing rabbit hole as far as doing the election-denying conspiracy stuff and COVID conspiracies and all the disinformation, fully buying in to Fox News kind of line. I feel like it's really radicalized him in a lot of ways." He went on to say his father was immersed in a 24-hour news cycle of fear and paranoia. And then he said the NRA pushing the stand your ground stuff and that you have to defend your home. When I heard what had happened, I didn't believe it at first, but then I said, yeah, I could see him doing that. But how many times, I think books have been written about people have written books about losing, feeling like they lost their parents, their fathers, their grandfathers, to this kind of Fox News brainwashing. I mean, if there was any way to quantify how many people Fox has poisoned like this. Wow. So I'm absolutely not surprised. So I mean, you can, you look at the violence that Fox unleashes and the right-wing media unleash. from Tree of Life to January 6th to this poor child to, I mean, all the people who now their first reaction is to shoot. Their doorbell rings and they get their guns. I don't think that's that unusual in this country. Now, I've already told you, my doorbell rings and I hit the floor. I hate unexpected anything coming to my door. I've been like that all my life. I don't go for a gun, though. I just don't answer. And I don't feel in danger. I just feel like, no, this is please go away. I mean, that's my own, the Yiddish word is mishigas. So I see that the Senate Judiciary Committee has requested that the Chief Justice come and testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee in a week or so to talk about, can we agree to make some changes over there on ethics kind of stuff? And the head of the committee is Senator Dick Durbin, and he wrote to Chief Justice Roberts this. I mean, these ethical problems were already apparent back in 2011, and the court's decade-long failure to address them has contributed to a crisis of public confidence. The status quo is no longer tenable. There's been no response from the Supreme Court, and anybody who would be expecting John Roberts to agree to come, it would be just delusional again. He doesn't have to, and he ain't going to. Separation of powers. So speaking of that, and best letter to the editor I saw, because it made me think, and I think it's a smart letter by a guy named William Brown, Maryland. And he says this requires you to think. Any assessment of the Supreme Court's place in the U.S. system of government must distinguish between its power and its authority. Wow, that's a distinction never occurred to me. The Supreme Court's power as opposed to its authority. This writer says the Supreme Court has no power. It has no way of enforcing its decisions. Think about that. The writer goes on, the authority of the Supreme Court rests on the willingness of other branches of government and the citizens to accept and abide by its decisions. The court's power derives from its authority. Whatever authority the Supreme Court has depends on its reputation for impartiality and integrity. What the current justices seem not to realize is that by their blatantly partisan decisions and corruption, they are on the verge of losing what little authority the court still has, and thus also losing its power. It's an interesting point. It does have no constitutional power because it has no enforcement mechanism for its decisions. It only has the power because we give it the power. that we agree when they make a decision. And speaking of that, it's fascinating because in this recent stay that Alito wrote about in dissenting from it, he dissented, and everyone who's read his dissent has said it's unhinged. Somebody said it reads like it read like a rant like a crazy person rant. He said he thought that even if the court were to decide something on abortion, that the Biden administration would not respect it and follow it. I'm thinking, what? That has never, so I don't know. Read it yourself. I don't know. That kind of intemperate accusation based on absolutely nothing by a justice is another reason why, of course, they're losing their authority and consequently their power. Obits. Bud Schuster, remember him? Bud Schuster was a congressman from Altoona or something, wasn't he? Was it Altoona? It was around in those parts. The reason I say Altoona is because there was a famous line that Senator Patrick Moynihan, remember him, said. Bud Schuster was the unabashed king of Congress of taking the money that Congress had at its disposal to disperse and sending it back to his district. He was the king. He practically, his district was like, what was it called? He was called the Asphalt King. He funneled billions into his district to construct highways. He was in Congress for 28 years, and man, he was the chair for 3 terms of the House Transportation Committee, which is where he would have the ability, and he unabashedly. And there are other members of Congress that do the same thing, obviously. He managed to divert a disproportionately large share of federal highway trust funds into his district. There's even a Bud Schuster Highway, which links State College, Altoona, and the Turnpike. Bud delivered. It's why no one ever opposed him. He ran unopposed 9 times. Did I mention, by the way, he was a Republican? And then, interestingly enough, it turns out there were actually term limits on how long you could be a committee chair. And so after he'd been the chair of the Transportation Committee for 3 2-year terms, for 6 years, he was told he couldn't do it anymore. And he stunned everybody. 2001 is the year. One day after he was sworn in for his 15th term, again, landslide election victory, he gets sworn in, he resigns. And he said this: after being quarterback of a Super Bowl championship team, I have no desire to play backup. So it was because he wasn't going to be the chair anymore. He said, what's the fun? I don't get to do. What's the fun? So it's an odd thing that he would have run, knowing he already knew he wasn't going to be the quarterback. I don't get it, but that's what he did. So he so perfected earmarking federal funds to go directly to his district. And this is where the Patrick Moynihan quote comes in. When Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Democrat of New York, was asked which state had reaped the biggest slice of the Highway Trust Fund pie, Moynihan replied, the state of Altoona. Bud Schuster, 91 years old. You remember that TV reporter that I was raving about, who reported in Tennessee on the corruption in their state government and their state legislature? I mean, just mind blowing. Well, he's gone and done it again. Same guy. He broke a story that, oh my God. Here, I'll actually, this is the story as they tell it. A member of the Republican leadership in the Tennessee House was recently found guilty of sexually harassing at least one legislative intern, likely two, by an ethics subcommittee acting in secret. Okay, so his own folks had said, yeah, he was sexually harassing at least one, maybe two, but this was a secret. So much for transparency. But this amazing reporter, same guy, he finds out. Somehow. He must have the most amazing sources. This guy, the guy who was found guilty, Campbell, he was the vice chair of the House Republican caucus, and he was very much a part of the effort to expel those two black legislators. As he... Can you imagine him, who, and his colleagues, knowing he'd been found guilty of sexual harassment, have the gall to get up and then throw out these two young black legislators for what? Bringing a megaphone onto the floor? So they find him guilty in this secret committee, but they don't kick him out. Not even throw him off a committee. There was nothing they did to him. But the same reporter said, but the taxpayers are apparently paying a cost for his crimes, because thousands of dollars have been spent to protect one victim, relocating her from the downtown apartment building where she and Campbell both had apartments, shipping her furniture back home to another part of the state and placing her in a downtown hotel for the remainder of her internship. The Republicans that control that legislature took his victim and put her in a hotel, got her out of she was in the same apartment building as he, so she would feel safe. They promised they would send her. So this is all done undercover. the reporter confronts him, mic in hand, about this one intern. And he says, startled, he says, "I had consensual adult conversations with 2 other adults off property," he insisted. And then the reporter's thinking, 2? That's the first there was a second one? Okay, anyway. He's resigned. He has resigned. So it's interesting. So one of the Republicans who voted to knock these 2 black guys out, he's now gone. He's gone. And it goes into excruciating detail about what he had said to these women, the young women. Just disgusting. Oh, man. So there's that. Or I have a piece. I think I'm going to save that. I'll save that for tomorrow. Can we do another obit? Barry Humphries. I didn't know this guy's name, but I sure know the character he portrayed, because that's the picture that's in the obit. And it's Dame Edna Everidge. And he played this. Well, I think actually the reason I wanted to share this obit is I think this should win an award for obit writing. The writer is a woman named Margalit Fox. And just this one sentence. By the way, Barry Humphries, who played Dame Edna on stage, was born in Australia, but he had lived much of his life in his last decades in England. And here's how she describes. I mean, I just think this is so brilliant. It's just one sentence. This is one sentence. I mean, to describe this character, and if you were looking at the picture of her, you would see how dead on the description is. Here it is. A stiletto-heeled, stiletto-tongued persona who might well have been the spawn of a menage a quatre, a foursome, involving Oscar Wilde, Salvador Dali, Auntie Mame, and Miss Piggy. Now that's brilliant. I mean, if you know the character, man, this character looked like the spawn of Oscar Wilde, Salvador Dali, Auntie Mame, and Miss Piggy. Dame Edna was not so much a character as a cultural phenomenon, a force of nature, trafficking in wicked, sequined commentary on the nature of fame. And it goes on and on and on and on. And then she notes at the end, which is fascinating, that since Charles Humphreys has died, obviously Dame Edna has died, but this is not an obit of her. It's the obit of the man who embodied her. But at the end of his obit, the obit writer does say, and it just comes out of nowhere, Dame Edna's husband, now see, this is all fiction at this point. At the end, she says, Dame Edna's husband, Norm, a chronic invalid whose prostate she often lamented, died long ago. Her survivors include an adored son, Kenny, who designed all her gowns, a less adored son, Bruce, and a despised daughter, the wayward Valmay. She steals things, puts them in her pantyhose, particularly frozen chickens when she's in a supermarket. And another daughter, Lois, was abducted as an infant by a rogue koala, a subject Dame Edith could bring herself to discuss with interviewers only rarely. Though the child was never seen again, the end of her life, Dame Edna never gave up hope she would be found. I'm looking, she told NPR in 2015. Every time I pass a eucalyptus tree, I look up. So that's I just thought, whoa, to do an obit on a male actor who's best known for this female character he created and embodied, realizing that Dame Edna is dead too and deserved a part of the obit. And I found out in reading the obit that Barry Humphries is someone who lives here. Barry Humphries also was the voice of Bruce, the great white shark in Finding Nemo. This case you knew. He was not, in this time when Republicans are going so crazy over men dressed as women, I don't know what they'd make of him, because Dame Edna was extraordinarily political. They would like Dame Edna, politically incorrect. In fact, so was he. He denounced political correctness as a new Puritanism. He described people who transition from male to female as mutilated men, and called Caitlyn Jenner a publicity-seeking rat bag. So he was not exactly, and he said he wasn't, and yet this is drag of the highest. And yet his humor was stuff that Republicans would, I guess, appreciate. Imagine it would make them very uncomfortable, the whole thing. It just doesn't fit neatly into their idea of who does drag, what drag is. I see I'm over time. Okay, I'll go quietly. Ha! I will. I'm going quietly. You have a good one. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.